The Rings of Power, Episode 3. We finally get to see a little bit of Tolkien's history, his lore, come to life a little bit more. In the first two episodes, we're dealing with a lot of characters that are new faces that don't really fit in with Tolkien necessarily. So I will admit, as a fan of Tolkien's work, I did enjoy getting to see specific places and hearing names that I recognize that actually worked for me a little bit more in this. Was this episode perfect? Oh, it fell way short in that category still. This still isn't a great show. It's a show that if it was drowning, it's barely staying afloat at this point, like before it just sinks to the very bottom. And I always get that feeling in this show that it's about to sink. And it's mostly because of the acting, the storylines that really don't make sense and really kind of go all over the place. We don't get very many interesting characters, and the characters that we do get are some are just like Galadriel is just like annoying waste of characters, in my personal opinion. But I'll go ahead. I'll start on this episode 3 review here on RANTS on the positive side. I like the Rondir. I like the elves and some of the powerful moments and even the sad deaths. Like, I will admit, that was actually one of my favorite moments in this episode was them trying to escape. It felt cool. It felt like, okay, how are they going to escape from all of these orcs in this situation? And there for a moment, it kind of had me. I kind of felt like, oh wow, they're actually going to do just that. And then everything just like collapsed upon them. Death happened. Everybody, like all hope became lost at that point. And I will admit, hey, it was kind of nice. Like, it was, I'm not saying that in a morbid kind of way. I'm saying that from a storytelling point of view. It was interesting because I didn't know where it was going. And once the payoff happened, I actually kind of felt something. So, for once in these 3 episodes, I actually like Rondir and I like the elves. Because as bad as what they've been trying to make humans out to be, the elves really don't talk any nicer about the humans than, the humans talk about the elves. So it just kind of makes you see this hatred on both sides that really doesn't make me feel sorry for the elves in any form or fashion. So I will admit that I did really actually enjoy a Rondir story and the elf story in this episode. And maybe it's the nostalgia part of it. And I've tried on this on these reviews to not really mention what happened, in the lore, the actual lore, and what it's happening on screen. Because I feel like too many people are inflating it to a certain extent. They're like, or going at it with a bad point of view, and then so therefore everything sucks because everything isn't according to lore. I'm just trying to look at this not as a fan of Tolkien, but as someone who's just watching a series. And I'm going to try my hardest to stay that way, but I will admit I did really enjoy bringing in names that I recognize, characters that it's really cool getting to see on screen. Now we got to see Elendil. We've got to see, some of the really interesting characters like Isildur, from the lore. And we get to see them in their prime, and I think that's pretty awesome in a lot of different ways. So I will admit my nostalgia did get the best of me when it come to that specific thing where I get to hear names. I'm like, I know that guy. That was actually really cool to me. And I will say this, Numenor looked amazing. It did. It looked amazing. Probably the best CGI we've actually seen so far. I've complained a lot about the CGI in this. Like, some of these look like some of the worst. They look. I'll tell you how the backdrops look to me. They look as unrealistic as a Skype background. Like, that's about how unrealistic that they have looked to me. They've been so unimpressive. They might be beautiful, and maybe if you're looking at it from the Wizard of Oz standpoint, 1930s ish. But as far as modern day thing, all I keep thinking of is the prequel trilogy of Star Wars and how bad that looked and how bad this looks. But I will admit, I did really enjoy the CGI that was in here. So that was actually pretty cool. In this, at least when it refers to Numenor. Now, as far as Elendil, that was the actor that plays him is actually really good, really good. I almost wish that the whole story was about him and about his family. I would watch that. I would literally watch that. I mean, Elendil, you got his son Isildur. And I don't remember the daughter's name. I don't remember her from like Canaan. I think she might be somebody that was added to the show. But anyways, I enjoyed the back and forth. I enjoyed the dialogue. I enjoyed the fact that we finally get to see a man stand up to Galadriel. Like, I mean, he literally, he's like, I'm just not really that impressed by you. All your threats and all your talk on blah, blah, blah. All this woke crap that she tries to spew about I am woman, hear me roar. And all that garbage that you normally hear in 2022 dialogue. He just kind of stood his ground and he acted like an actually interesting character. And, that's kind of what I like from my characters. A real conversation, a real, standing your ground kind of moment. I like that because, and maybe it's partly because I'm just not really a big Galadriel fan, which blows my mind that I'm not a Galadriel fan out of all things because, from Lord of the Rings, she's awesome. And then we get this one and I'm like, what is wrong with this character? But overall, I liked Elendil. I liked Isildur. I thought they were interesting characters to add to the fray. And you know what? I feel like Halbrand, I made that prediction that Halbrand is actually Sauron. I'm starting to kind of doubt it to a certain extent simply because of the end of the episode. But then I'm like, oh, they're just dropping way, way too many hints. When he mentions to Galadriel that he's seeking peace for longer than she could ever imagine. When he says that he got, that little sigil off of a dead man, makes you think that he's actually probably telling the truth and that she's just not buying it. And then also his interest with the blacksmith. Like, he's really interested in forging. And he goes to that blacksmith and he tells him, I'm actually the best blacksmith on this island. That just kind of makes me think, wow, this is Sauron. This is clearly Sauron. They are literally pointing in the direction that this is Sauron. And I will admit, I do like shows that make me have to come up with fan theories. I liked it in WandaVision. WandaVision was awesome because I got to come up with all these fan theories in my head of is this and is this that, and it makes shows interesting. It makes me want to tune in for the next one, and so I felt like they did a really good job with that. And that queen, I don't know if she's queen or if she's Princess Muriel of Numenor. I thought she had some really interesting dialogue. I kind of like her character, at least so far. I like her character. I thought she had a really interesting back and forth with Galadriel. She's another character that just completely stands her ground. And like I said, it kind of puts Galadriel on her heels a little bit. She's not getting her way. She's not able to just completely and totally bully her way into things like she was doing with the elves. She's actually coming across people that are like, hey, you don't rule here. You don't make demands. You follow what we tell you to do. And I actually kind of thought that was really interesting dialogue between her and Muriel. And you know what? It just made her feel like a queen. It made that Muriel feel like a queen. So I'm like, that's pretty awesome. I liked that. I liked her. Also liked that Queen Muriel's um, back and forth with Elendil. It's where he's kind of like, hey, I'm a loyal Numenorian, whatever they're called. I'm loyal to this, and she's like, what does your name really mean? And it means like friend of elves or something along those lines. And that is just like one of those moments like, ooh, I wonder where this is going to go. So I really liked the back and forth that they actually did on that. I loved her dialogue. And I don't say that very much in this show, that I love the dialogue. But I really enjoyed Muriel's dialogue in this with the other characters. And another thing when it comes to, back to Elendil, Isildur, when he's on that boat, to me, that was kind of a cheesy moment when he reaches up and, of course, grabs a guy from falling into the thing. But who was the voice that was calling to him from the island? And was that Numenor that was the island? It's very strange to me. Like, that caught my attention. I'm like, okay, now we're getting into really a territory where there's going to be a lot of fan theories, and we've got something to tune into for next episode. So I really like that scene, and I like the guy that plays Isildur too. And then, of course, the sign of Sauron. That was made such a big deal in episode 1, and I felt like it actually did get some payoff. I really do. I felt like it got some payoff in this one when we find out, spoiler alert, just telling everybody, that it is it's basically a map. It's a map of Sauron's plans, which I thought was pretty interesting reveal. Why didn't they make every reveal of all these questions that they have going forward as cool as what that one was? I might actually start liking this show a lot more. If they can just kind of maybe focus on specific characters and not on, like soap opera like scenes where, hey, this person looks off in the distance and then all of a sudden something interesting happens and we got to shoot to somebody else. No, I want to stick with that character and see what happens. So, I mean, that to me, the voice that called out to Isildur, I want to know who that was and what that was all about. And I want to know what the sign of Sauron actually is what's going to happen with this reveal. That's going to be really interesting moving forward. As far as, I don't know if I liked it or I hated how dark the Harfoots were. I'm going to say I don't like it. I really actually don't like it. But I will admit there was one slight moment that I actually did enjoy the Harfoots, and it's when they spoke about ones that have been left behind and ones that they have lost. That was kind of a touching moment. And then it turned real dark, and then it became like horrible. Like, I'm like, these are twisted people. And it kind of, to a certain extent, just ruined me a little bit on Harfoots. They are pretty sadistic, really sadistic in a lot of ways, with what they think is funny. But anyways, now I'll get to my favorite part, and that's the orcs. Why would the orcs working in daylight? Like, what is the need for them to work in daylight? Like, I totally get it. They've got slaves that are working. But at the same time, I'm like, that really actually would work better if you did that during the day. I mean, during the night. You would be under the cover, of course. You wouldn't be attracting any kind of attention. But it just was odd to me that that's the one thing that could actually allow prisoners to escape is if you have them working in the day and then they can somehow use that to their advantage to escape. And there they go. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened in this episode. And it almost worked. It almost worked. So I'm kind of like, that was kind of stupid. Like, I don't think that's really thought out in this series. And of course, Galadriel. Where do I go with Galadriel? Probably one of the worst protagonists I have ever seen for a series. She is the most unlikable. Look, there is characters that you can say, man, these characters are selfish, they're this, they're that. But I have never seen a character that was all of those things and yet so unlikable and literally have no redeeming qualities. And again, this is where my nostalgia is really affecting me, and I'm trying not to let it, of Galadriel. Galadriel doesn't supposed to be this character. And so it does kind of bother me, and it does affect me. And I don't understand even some things that happen when it come to her. Like some of her dialogue. Like when she tells that it was the elves that started the war with Morgoth. I don't remember that. I thought it was the Silmarils that was, Morgoth stealing them was what caused that. So instead of it being the Silmarils being the cause of it and Morgoth stealing it, it's now the elves that started it with Morgoth, which that didn't make any sense to me. That's not how I remembered it. Maybe I'm just missing something or forgetting something, but I thought that was a very weird moment. And then there was that weird horse scene. That weird horse scene that I cannot explain for the life of me. And that was the creepiest moment, seeing her so happy on the back of a horse. Like, that was, I don't know why that bothered me, but it really did. So yeah, anything with her, absolutely hated it. Absolutely hated it. Now, as far as going back to the Harfoots, and I'll tell you, that moment, like I said, I enjoyed the falling behind speech until it got to the horrible moment where they're laughing at a guy that got killed by bees. And they're like, ha ha ha, that's so funny. The dude got stung to death by bees and you're laughing about it. And they're like, well, he wasn't so bright anyways. So does that mean that because he wasn't bright, that he should be stung to death by bees? Is that what their idea of comic relief is? Like, that kind of was really cruel. And then, of course, you've got them, one of the Harfoots breaks his ankle, and they're like, instead of helping you, we're actually going to put you at the back end where that you can die watching us leave you. That's awful. Awful in so many different ways, and it made it even worse when you saw the ones in front of them frolicking ahead while they're struggling. I mean, that just was evil, like Sauron, like evil. So I'm not into this Harfoot thing. I think they made the hobbits look terrible in this series, incredibly terrible. Now, I will admit, as much as I am a little bit intrigued by the stranger, his comic relief in this just wasn't working either. It just seemed like the only interesting part about the Harfoot subplot was the stranger, but then they kind of made him into like this, I don't know, lovable oaf to a certain extent. And he's not really that funny, and he's not really that interesting when put in that position. He's interesting when they're trying to conceal his identity and we're trying to figure it out. Not when he's just going, friend. No, I don't want that. That sounds so much like Hodor from A Song of Ice and Fire. That just, I don't want no part of that part of the stranger. I want the mystery behind the stranger, not the idiocy of the stranger. Another thing, and again, this is another aspect where I'm having a really hard time trying to differentiate the show from what I know about Tolkien's lore. And I think they're going to run into some seriously confusing plot lines in the future. No matter how far this show goes, I think it is going to run into these plot lines simply because they are condensing history in such strange ways that I don't know how you can come out to the same. I see where you can go into the same direction, but I don't see how the ending can ever be the same as what the lore is. It's just it feels like they're introducing them at the wrong times. And the condensing of the history is really going to cause problems moving forward. And I just wonder how the showrunners are going to handle that. But overall, I mean, I guess my final thoughts on this was Harfoot Migration was really sadistic and boring. Galadriel still sucks, but we finally did get some interesting, intriguing questions that makes me want to tune in for the next episode. And it makes me want to watch more. You know, hey, maybe the mystery will keep me going in this. Maybe. And of course, we got no dwarves, and I'm kind of upset about that because I'm like, I actually really enjoyed that last episode, and I'm kind of disappointed we didn't get to see more out of it. I'm actually going to give this episode a 7 out of 10, simply because of the mystery and the, bringing familiar names into the lore that actually I feel like wasn't butchering the lore. It felt like they actually brought those characters in to be the characters that they were in the lore. They might be condensing the history and changing some things, but I felt like at least the characters felt like what those characters were supposed to feel like. And that actually meant something to me, because I tell you, what they did with Galadriel, I feel like they butchered her character. They turned her into someone that's really unlikable. And I'm glad that the ones that they brought into the lore that are familiar names, I'm glad that they're actually people that I can actually get behind and look forward to seeing more of. So overall, I thought this was a little bit of a step up. I still don't think it's great television, but I will say that it did give me enough mystery and enough nostalgia that actually made me want to move forward and excited for the next episode. And of course, we might get that big Sauron reveal next episodes, which that'll be pretty cool if we do get to see a face of that, or maybe that is Sauron. Who knows? We'll get to find out next episode. But overall, guys, let me know what y'all think down in the comments down below. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Let me know. And as always, thank y'all so much for watching. Y'all take care.